Voices to hear.
Hi, and welcome to Voices to Hear podcast. My name is Boris. I'm a volunteer at the Volunteer Center Skopje. And today we have a special guest whose name is Branislav Kaleta. And Branislav is connecting to us from Dublin. He's currently working as a research assistant at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. And he's researching how to live a good life, which is a very interesting topic. Beforehand, he finished his master's in psychology, neuroscience, and neuroimaging at the University of York, and he studied psychology. Thank you very much, Branyo, for coming.
Yeah, of course. And thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited.
For me, how we got to know each other is through a common friend who mentioned to me what you are researching. So greetings to Emma. And I thought this would be super interesting to talk to you about. What does it mean to research a good and healthy lifestyle? How would you define it, or how does it work?
Obviously, there are many approaches to studying this topic, and our approach is a mix of positive psychology, a field called lifestyle medicine, and sort of like public health as well. And one of the ways of looking at how to live a good life is just looking at things like how is your sleep, how is your nutrition, how are your relationships, and sort of things like that. We just look at how do different things that you do or interact with, how do they balance these sort of things. So maybe you have a lot of physical activity, spend most of your day working out, running, but maybe at the cost of your relationships, right? You don't have as much time to hang out with people. So the goal of this is for you to figure out which things I am already good at and which things I maybe should work on a bit. And obviously your constraints are most of the time it's time, right? Yeah. So it's mostly really figuring out how to balance that well. And obviously every person's needs are going to be different. Some people need, let's say, 1 hour of socializing with other people. Some people might need 8 or 12. So this really depends on the person, right? But really what it is about, and I guess in this way, we really have not moved on from like ancient Greek philosophy where they said, oh, it's all about striking the balance. Well, it is all about striking the balance between all of these different things in order for you to figure out what works best for you at your specific time.
Maybe on practical terms, you are in a team of people, co-researchers and scientists. How does it look to be researching? How do you function?
I'm part of the Center for Positive Health Sciences at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. And it's a smaller center. I think it's about 30-ish people. What I really appreciate about it is its interdisciplinarity. Like we have people who focus on nutrition. We have people who focus on immunology. We have engineers. We have people focusing on meditation. Really any part of this puzzle of how to figure out how to live a good life, we have someone covering it to some extent. And on that, a few of my other colleagues are focusing on the psychology side of it. But as I'm saying, the psychology side of it is just one small part of it. In science, as most people will know, interdisciplinarity is where it's at. If you're just in your like one small bubble, then it might be interesting, but you will not figure out as much as you will with other people who are kind of trying to tackle the same question, but from a completely different angle.
Or it could be felt in your answer. And we spoke about this before. And I wanted to ask you about it because when we were calling beforehand, talking about recording this podcast, you mentioned that this is your dream job and that you enjoy it so much. My question would be, why is it your dream job? What does it involve? How does it feel? It's super interesting.
Yes, I say that it's my dream job because I've been wanting to do psychology since I was, I think, genuinely like 12 or 13, because I read a book on psychology and I was just like, wow, this is so interesting. So that's when I figured out I want to do psychology. With like my education in Slovakia, I thought like psychology is obviously like therapy stuff and clinical psychology. And then once I discovered that like, oh, psychology is about way more things than just clinical psychology. Like you can study things like how to live a good life, and more of this sort of a different approach to looking at who we are as people and what behaviors we have and how does that interact. Once I saw that you could study those topics, and especially to me, they're very wholesome topics like studying hope. I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. And this is exactly the field that I want to go to. So for me to actually years later, after my psychology degree, to get to a job which actually does study all of that I've been hoping to study for years was a nice culmination of it. And that's why I'm saying it's a dream job, because I genuinely am studying what I've been wanting to study for years before I started this. I would also say there is a second part of this, is that there are so many different topics that I would want to study. I feel like I keep saying that like I have like many PhDs that I could be doing, that I have so many questions that I want to do and study, is that it's a nice discovery. My supervisor, Professor Jolanta Burke, I remember we were talking about, hey, Branjo, what do you want to do for your PhD? And then this was 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago when I was starting at the center. We started a project about green spaces and that kind of stuff. And she asked me, hey, is this potentially a topic that you would be wanting to do a PhD on? Now, as I said, I have a bazillion ideas for what to do a PhD on, but actually doing nature related stuff was not really in it, right? I didn't know much about the topic. So back then I said, okay, we can try it out, but I'm not actually sure. Here I am 2 years later doing actually research on the benefits of nature for people. And so what I mean to say is it's also about the discovery. Like, I think some people dislike it, some people like it. I like it that the more research you do, with every question that you answer, there are 10 more questions that pop up that you cannot answer. And I'm really enjoying that. And that's what I mean by like discovering the topic and discovering what you like. So over the last 2 years, I've been discovering more and more questions that I want to answer.
I really can relate to that, and maybe also our listeners.
I would add one more thing, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. As you're saying this, because what you're saying prompted me to think about another thing. I think this is a concept from positive psychology as well, which are strengths, which you might be familiar with, as you've done the questionnaire, I think. Yes. But anyway, so the strengths, what I mean is it's my dream job, obviously, because I've been wanting to do it, and then I am actually doing it. I am still enjoying it very much so, but it's also a job that matches my strengths very well. Like, I enjoy doing research. I'm somewhat good at it. And so then I'm really happy to do it, right? And I'm enjoying it. So it's a self-reinforcing thing, right?
Yeah.
The beautiful thing is everyone has different strengths. And so it's really about, I guess the one thing is like, do you want to do it? Have you been thinking about doing it? That's why it's a dream job. But also, a dream job could just be something you're really good at and that really matches your needs and your strengths as well. Like, are you really using what you're best at in your job? And chances are, if you're using what you're good at, you're also going to enjoy it, right? So that's another aspect of it.
I love it. For the context, and I think this might be funny, because Branjo sent me before this podcast a brief questionnaire of very short, but 96 questions about the personality and the strength. That's what we are talking about now. And I was like, whoa, I'm really going to talk to a researcher / scientist, because I get this brief beforehand.
Because he sent
you.
I love it.
I love it. And it was definitely insightful. And it's something interesting, maybe what you're pointing towards, that if you know your strengths, what you're good at and what you enjoy, then it's a good prospect for having a dream job.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say, and a large part of it is knowing your strengths, right? So that's why I sent you the questionnaire. Some people are very aware of their strengths by default, or like you think about them, or maybe your parents prompted you to think, or maybe you've had really good teachers in life who made you aware of your strengths, right? Like once, maybe in primary school, you were really prompted, oh, you're really good at mathematics. You've been going to mathematics competitions. And then that sort of just carries on with your life. So you end up thinking, oh, perfect. My strength is mathematics and logic and stuff like that. And so positive psychology has this long list of strengths, which covers that. And I believe there are like 24 of them, 24 or something like that. And it's all kinds of different strengths. Like your strength might be like zest for life or humor and things like that, which really people might not think about as strengths because society might not value them in the sort of culture and society that we live in. We might not value some things as much as others, but they are still very much a strengths, and it's very valuable for you to know them. I'm going to mention 2 years ago when I started the job, I was talking to my friend. I was explaining sort of what sort of positive psychology is, what sort of a job I do. And he did not know his strengths because I was introducing strengths as a topic. And he said, oh, I'm not really sure what those are. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I was just thinking, oh, that's a That's such a weird, because I've been obviously thinking about strengths for a long time because of this. And so I was thinking, oh, that's so like, please go do the question, like figure out what you're good at. No, like figure out, obviously, I think everyone knows to some extent what they're good at, but to really formalize it and say, hey, maybe aesthetics is your strength and you really love, like there are so many things you can be good at. And so it's really worthwhile looking at what are my top 5, top 10 things that are my strengths. How can I use them in my everyday life? If humor is your strength, do you use it? Do you actually use it in some way at work with your family? And so the reason I sent you the questionnaire is so that you're familiar with like what I'm talking about. But to reverse this podcast just for a short bit, how did you find it? Did you find it valuable? Did you agree with what you found? Did you not? Would you recommend that the listeners do it or not? How was your experience of the strengths?
At the end, I would love to ask you about resources, things you find the most interesting and exciting. And I think maybe this personality or like strengths questionnaire could be one of the recommendations we
definitely
could give.
Yes, yeah, we can link
and it feels first you're clicking these questions which you're like, oh, okay. But then at the end with the outcome, I was like, yes, I can relate to this. And to some extent, it feels like me on a paper with my characteristics or I can see it reflected even in my activities, what I enjoy, when I feel good, when I feel like I'm burning for this, and it matches with the strengths or the characteristics.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And that's exactly what it's meant to be. Like, hopefully by the end of it, you kind of see like, oh yeah, these are kind of things that I'm familiar with. Yeah. And I see how I can use this. Or maybe there is a hidden strength. Like maybe one of your top 5 is like, oh, I didn't really know that this is one of the things that are, but now that I think about it, maybe I do appreciate it. So yes, I loved it. And I think everyone should know what they're like good at, because then you can start making decisions about what's the job I want to have? How do I want to interact with the world? And you probably want to interact with your strengths, because as you have mentioned yourself, if you interact with the world in some way, like using your strengths, chances are you're going to enjoy it more. You're going to be burning for it more. You're going to add more passion with it. And that's my strengths tangent.
Nice. Maybe when we were calling, you explained it absolutely wonderfully. And it was also to me new. And you mentioned it many times by now, positive psychology. And could you explain it very briefly so that our listeners...
very briefly. So this is the way I'm going to explain it now from a few years ago. And we're trying to come up with different ways to conceptualize this. But this was used essentially as a way to describe comparison between regular psychology and positive psychology. Regular psychology, as you probably think about it already. So what psychology does is researches mental health related things. So mental health disorders and things like that. And then there are many other things that psychology looks at York at my university. I spent like 4 years writing many essays about memory and cognition and how the brain works and all that. In a way, psychology covers everything. You could go from neuroscience all the way to marketing psychology, right? It's a part of life through everything. And what positive psychology looks at really is, we can say, the positive side of things in terms of, okay, all of that is like mental health stuff or like very basic things, but what's the good part of, like, how do we not only look at, hey, as you as a person, what is your mental health disorder? But also kind of linking it, I guess I can link it back to strengths. What are your strengths? What are you good at? How do we take you not just from like -5 to 0, where you're alive, you're existing, but sometimes it can feel like you're sort of just going through life and nice things are not happening to you, but you are surviving. You have a job, but you're kind of just existing. And there is a positive psychology word for it, or a psychology word for it, which is called languishing. You're just sort of existing. And then how do we take you from this state of you're fine, you may not have any mental health issues, but you're sort of just existing? How do we take you into more proactive, in this way, positive side of things? How do we make you want to live? How do we make you want to have a zest for life? How do we make you more excited for things happening? And that's sort of what positive psychology looks at.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Now, speaking of positive psychology, I would like you to zoom into the effects of nature on human well-being, which was and still is part of your interest. And you've mentioned projects where you were involved with the green spaces. For example, Forest for Youth. Can you give us some ideas about the nature in our lives and how it can help us flourish?
I love that you mentioned the word flourish, because obviously it's mostly related to flowers and plants, like plants can flourish. And that's another way of, in a way, I'll answer the previous question in the same way, because I think it's my favorite way of like explaining this. A plant or a flower will survive really bad hardship, right? Like there are plants which can survive, although not in the best state. They will not be flourishing, but they will survive in your pot, even if you don't flower them for some time. But what you do want them to do eventually is flourish, right? You want that flower to be there. That means you need to take good care of it, like putting all the nutrients in and watering it and everything. Well, what my research and our research on nature is really telling us, that at least what I'm getting from it over the last 2.5 years is, well, people are not that different from flowers. As in, like, you need to take good care of yourself in order to flourish, right? You need all the necessary nutrients, like sleep, proper food and everything, some friends, and then you will actually flourish. You will survive without them. That's perfectly fine, but you will not be flourishing. What we want you to do is flourish. And that links very nicely to your next question. So our research, it started off with looking at urban green spaces and the benefits of parks. These are not questions about, is nature good for us? I think most of us will agree that nature is good for you. People enjoy nature. It was more about, again, as I said, more questions appear once that one's answered. So this question was more about, okay, we know urban green spaces. There is a large variety of them. Most people, in fact, chances are most of the listeners of this podcast live in a city or a town in some way. Chances are that place has some urban green spaces. And you know that can have a large variety. You can go all the way from a most beautiful park with a fountain, benches, many trees, maybe even some animals like swans, ducks, birds, all the way to just sort of like a green field with maybe a few trees, nothing else on it. So it's really, there is a large variety. And so our question was, well, okay, does this quality matter? What are the essential qualities of an urban green space in order for it to be beneficial in the same way that other nature is, like a forest, for example? And so that was our first question. And then this has moved on into Forest for Youth, which is a larger Interreg Northwestern Europe project supported by the European Union. And it's a project across multiple countries of Northwestern Europe, where we're working with foresters, psychiatrists, psychologists, and many other people from different fields to figure out, okay, how can we use nature to help people in general, but specifically adolescents and adolescents who are in psychiatric care. There are some great people working on this, and that's how sort of this nature research line has developed into looking at the benefits of forests. Yes.
And when we are speaking about nature, its effects, one of the things you worked on and you mentioned was also in the Psych Tales project is awe.
Yeah.
And I think you are very excited about awe from what I was reading. And for me, I find it also beautiful idea. Could you give us some introduction into what is awe? A very short word, but it can mean a lot.
If anyone asks me about awe, I could keep going for hours, because
Next
it's another
podcast
topic
with Branio about awe only.
Yes, no, because I've been thinking about awe a lot. It's my favorite emotion. Just to introduce awe for podcast listeners, the way you can find this emotion, it's AWE. That's what we mean when we say awe. The easiest way to experience awe is when you're in nature. You can look at like a beautiful forest, you might experience awe. You are at the top of a mountain and you're looking at the view of the valley, another way to experience awe. But there are many other ways of experiencing awe. We have a scientific way of like defining awe, but it would take so much time that I'll just give you examples. And I encourage everyone who's listening, try to pick at least one or two of the examples that I'm going to mention and say, oh yeah, that's when I experienced, or like I have experienced all like this maybe 2 years ago in this specific situation. So for example, imagine you listen to like an intense and skillful guitar solo, right, at a concert. And it's very skillful. You can see like it's crazy intense and it's so skillful of that person playing guitar at such a high top tier level. And you experience awe of the skill of this person. Like, wow, that's amazing. Another thing that might come up from the skill sort of category of awe is, for example, imagine you're watching your favorite sports match, right? We've just had the recent Winter Olympics just now. So imagine just go back to the last time you've watched some kind of a sport and and you see someone doing something incredibly skillful, like maybe they do sort of like I'm imagining, whether it's like ice hockey or football or whatever, they do some kind of a dribble, basketball, they break someone's ankles figuratively, not literally, but you know what I mean? Like they do something so skillful that you're like, wow, this person is on a completely different level, right? So that's another thing that I'm thinking about is I have just talked to my colleague and she mentioned like a beautiful idea because she said to me that she experiences awe from culture, right? And you can imagine this through song being of like, okay, this song is a ritual. This is a shared song. Maybe it's a song that's 200 years old and these people sing it every single time. The thing I love about awe is that it can be both physical and conceptual. Like you see a big mountain, you see an amazing view. That's a very physical level of awe, but it can be conceptual as well. As I said, with someone's skill, for example, there are many categories like this that I could keep listing off, but just think about when was the last time you were truly like amazed at something, you felt shivers because it was such an amazing performance, or you were tackled with an idea so big that you had to sort of stop and think about it to help you make sense of it, right? And like you can imagine this, like the physical response that people get when they experience awe is goosebumps, right? That's a very common one. And then usually what people look like, this will not make sense for the podcast listeners, but just imagine someone who like has their mouth open, right? Because you're amazed at something, your eyes open because your brain wants more information about whatever is going on. So your eyes open up, your mouth opens up, and you're just sort of amazed at something. What I love about awe, and this is what I'll finish off with because I could keep going for a way long. What I love about it is that it's a transformational emotion, right? Like after you experience something like this, your experience of life is changed in some way. You listen to that sick guitar solo and you're like, wow, I didn't know people could reach such skill. And this is amazing. And now your knowledge of what people are capable of is forever changed, right? And so when you experience awe, there is something that changes you fundamentally, that your experience afterwards is way different. And so I just encourage everyone, there are many different ways you could experience awe. So really just think about like, when was the last time you felt awe? What situation was it? Why?
And maybe connecting to that, could clouds and the stars create this awe and improve our well-being?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a research assistant. I'm a PhD scholar as well. And my PhD topic, in addition to working on the forest benefits side of things, is I'm also looking at the benefits of stargazing and cloud spotting. And so it's really very simple, like looking at stars and looking at clouds. Wherever you are, if you're walking outside right now or if you're inside, chances are you might be able to see some clouds. So yes, awe, I think that's where I come at it from, especially for stargazing. Stargazing to me is the fundamental awe like trigger, I guess. When thinking about the largeness of the universe, right? And both in space, like how big it is, but also in time, that definitely I experience awe when thinking about it or looking at stars. And it's definitely one of the benefits that stargazing and cloud spotting could have for people as well. I'm currently finishing my first year of the PhD of looking at stargazing and cloud spotting. So I'm in the very early stages and it's sort of still in this brainstorming stage of its benefits, but definitely awe is one of the things that we're considering. Another one is to do with, especially with cloud spotting, just having time to think about something in an unstructured way, right? Because I feel like, again, and this has to do with the way our culture and society is set up right now. You go from one task to another, right? You're working on something throughout the day, then you need to do this, you need to do your shopping, maybe you need to call a friend. There's always like something to do. And there is very little time to just do nothing. Also, psychologically, doing nothing is very helpful. Like your brain is an amazing thing and it keeps working on things in the background, even when you're not thinking about them. I think most people who are listening to this podcast will be able to relate to the moment of, you're really trying to solve some problem and then either you go back to sleep or you like ignore it for a few days. And then suddenly you get like, oh, this is how I solve it. And then you go back to it and, this is exactly it. And so it's this idea, I believe, one of the terms for it is creative incubation, right? Is that you incubate an idea for a bit. You don't actively think about it. You just sort of let it sit in the background and your brain will figure it out. It's amazing. Trust your brain. And so cloud spotting could be one of the ways that you do this, right? Is that you don't need to necessarily do some at all times. You can just sit down, look at clouds, maybe go into a park, look at some beautiful clouds that are just passing by and just sort of let yourself have some unstructured time. Just think about whatever comes to your mind. Some people do compare it to meditation. That's an area of like that we're exploring it as well. Because whenever I'm describing this, some people are like, "Well, that's just meditation." I'm like, "You're not entirely wrong. There are so many things that we could look at. We're just exploring at the moment." But definitely, it's such an exciting area, and it's a very new area of research as well. Although what I love about it is that as humanity, we've been looking at stars ever since we existed, really. And so I love this idea because it's something that connects us through time with everyone and our ancestors and everything, whether it's through mythology or constellations, right? Most people enjoy it. I'm yet to find a person who would say that they hate stargazing or that they hate stars. Or I guess that's one of the interesting things. Some people don't enjoy it because it's kind of a terrifying thing to do. Like, yes, space is big and maybe it's scary. Are there aliens? So like there are so many things. There are so many things to think about when you're doing it, is that some people do find it challenging to encompass that breadth of ideas. But I'm yet to find someone who says, no, stars look ugly. They're like, I hate this. It's a very good topic. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm researching it.
For me, I have a small anecdote when we were hiking with the friends from a youth camp in Slovakia. It was, I think, my first year, and they were all excited to sleep outside. And we were stargazing, and it was beautiful. But then around 3 a.m., I woke up and I was like, either I'm going to put on more layers or I freeze to death because. So that was my first memory of sleeping on a meadow and watching the stars. But then feeling absolutely cold, freezing.
I think what that highlights is like at the way it works right now, again, with most people living in cities, is it's hard to see the stars because of artificial light pollution. And so you have to go out to places where you can see the stars or maybe can see the Milky Way. I think one of the things that I would suggest for the listeners is like, when was the last time you've seen the Milky Way, right? Because like chances are you don't get a good chance to see it most of the time because artificial light pollution. So go seek it out. I don't know. There are very easily found, there are global maps you can find of artificial light pollution. You can just go online and find wherever you live, wherever you work, just find a place which has the least light pollution and just go there. Yeah.
I have two things because we are Zoom calling with Brano and I see him smiling a lot and really enjoying, and I love it. And I would like to ask you, Brano, how does researching and your work now and getting involved with the topics and maybe also with your colleagues, how did it shape you as an individual? How did it change you researching human well-being and positive psychology?
I think one of the things is obviously on paper, I can list all the things you need to do to live a healthy life, right? But as I said, there are time constraints on it. Oftentimes there are maybe money constraints on it as well, right? So we cannot ignore that, like the socioeconomic aspects of it. And so I think one of the nice things is that people who are researching this, like me, although on paper we know all the things we should be doing to have a healthy life, I still have to spend most of the day behind the computer working on this, right? So that's not exactly conducive to, like, ideally I would be out doing sports, then hanging out with my friends, doing some work. But that's what I mean is that, like, although we know exactly on paper what I should be doing, and I'm saying, oh, you should do this, you should do that, find the balance in your things. This is an infinite job because your circumstances keep changing. Maybe you find your balance in all of these things that you need to find: your friendships, sleep, nutrition. Maybe you find the balance for now, but maybe you move to a different place. Maybe you find a new job and your schedule will change, your opportunities will change, and you will need to rebalance that again. So the way it's changed me is the things and the activities we do to improve our health and well-being, they take time to figure out. I could tell you, yes, going for a walk, doing your 7,000 or 10,000 steps a day is going to, like, improve your life and you should do it every day. But it takes time for that to become a part of your schedule, a part of your thing that you do automatically. Ideally, what I would want you to do is not think about it actively, right? I'll tell you. So for example, from our conversation just now, I would tell you, hey, and this comes from my supervisor, Holly Ann Passmore, on my PhD. Her research is on the noticing nature intervention, which is really just going outside and noticing nature, not just being in nature, but actually noticing it. Focus on that bird, look at that tree. It's one thing for you to be like, okay, now do noticing nature 3 times a week at this specific day, that's blah, blah, whatever. Chances are, as we go back to individual differences, this will depend. Maybe you can only do it in the morning, maybe you can do it in the evening. The most important thing is that you do something, right? You don't need to do, in psychology, we have like thousands and thousands of things you could be doing to improve your health and well-being. Noticing nature is one of them. My ideal way of doing this is, first of all, figure out what works best for you. Maybe you don't need to notice nature. Maybe what you need to do is think about your 3 good things that you're grateful for every day, right? And then do it enough to the point where you're not thinking about it as an intervention anymore, right? Like you're not thinking about this as, oh, I'm doing the noticing nature intervention because I need to do it. But it becomes a thing where you go out into nature and you notice nature and you will never think about the intervention itself ever again. It just becomes a part of who you are. The more things like this you can do, the easier it is going to live a good and healthy life, right? It's one thing to force yourself, I know I need to do this many steps, or I need to go to the gym this many times a week because that's what the researchers told me to do. Like, this is how I live a good life. But years later, after you've been doing it for a long time, you're not doing an intervention. You're not going to the gym because researchers told you to. You just are a person who goes to the gym and works out because you enjoy it, not because someone told you to. So it really is about, again, going to very basic psychology and in a way philosophy as well. Once these good behaviors and actions become really a part of you, and you just do them automatically without thinking about it, without spending brain energy on it, that's the best way to do it, right? But it takes time. It's not going to happen over a week. Behaviors take time. There are many books written about how much time it takes to do behaviors and stuff like that. So what I'm saying is pick things that you want to do, whether it's exercise or noticing nature and a bazillion other things you could be doing, and then make a behavior out of it to the point where you completely forget that I told you about it on the podcast, right? I'm hoping that like 30 years from now, you forget about this podcast and you're just noticing nature automatically, right? And you're just doing it, right? So that's my hope for it, that you can lead yourself into leading a good and healthy life.
I think that's absolutely wonderful message for our listeners, even for me, totally. Thank you very much, Brano. Thank you, dear listeners, for listening. Thank you, Brano, for joining and sharing your insights, your personal passions. Thank you for listening to Voices podcast, and see you in next episode. And to you, Brano, wish you all the best in your research and many, many new exciting findings to come.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Voices to hear.